Today we're going to paint a simple little croissant. I'm going to be using a Princeton Select Artiste brush, size 3 round, and I have my Winsor and Newton Cotman watercolors that I have in a palette here, and I'll just be mixing them up into some beige and kind of brown tones for our baked croissant colors. So I'm going to start out with a little bit of the beige here, and I have my croissant traced lightly on the paper, just as a general guide. You don't have to, but I just like to have a little bit of an outline. And I'm first going to trace the little end of the croissant here. And I've mixed those colors up so that I have a good amount of water in them, but they're still a bit concentrated. And once I do that outline, I'll add more water into it to help spread it around. Once I have that beige laid down, I'm going to take a little bit of brown for that toasty color at the end here. And that just helps kind of give it a little bit of dimension. And then you can dry your brush to pick up a bit of that water if there's a little much. And by picking up some of that water in the center, kind of make it look a little bit more rounded. I'm going to leave a bit of a gap around here and let that dry, and grab that beige again and do the next little section of the croissant here. So again, just outlining it. Moving pretty quickly to make sure it doesn't dry so that I can add that water and spread out that color before the outline gets too harsh. So just putting all that water down and moving it around. And then I'm going to add a little bit more brown here, again to give it a bit of that toasted color. If you want a bit more variety, you can also grab a bit of orange. Just add that in wherever you'd like to get a bit more variation in the color. Once you add the water, it helps everything mingle together and gets those colors moving around nicely. And then again, dry off the brush if you want to pick up some of that color in the center to make it look a bit more rounded, and then kind of darker at the edges where it goes down. And we're going to do the same for the next section, leaving a bit of a gap, and start making that outline. Grab some water quickly and fill that in while it's still wet. Dropping in a bit more of that beige color, a bit more of the brown at the bottom. And I'm going to grab a bit more of that orange at the top here. Letting that all mix together. Same thing for the next section. I'll leave a little gap here again. More brown to put at the very bottom there. Some orange at the top again. Just repeating the same pattern in each section basically. And then moving that around a bit. over to the next one here. I'm going to leave a bit of a smaller gap at the bottom here where the croissant curves in. I'm keeping the gap as I go up. And just tapering it in to match the angle of where the croissant is curling. Same thing, drop those colors in the top and bottom. Move on to this next one and do the same thing, just tapering in that gap at the bottom. And probably keeping it pretty small throughout because this section of the croissant is further away from us, so it's kind of shrunken down compared to the others. And the last section at the very end over here, still with a little bit of that gap. Just a tiny croissant end. Not much room to add other colors in here, but we can still drop a bit of each one. Once we can make sure that that other section has dried, I'm going to grab some of that color we started with and really water it down so that it's very, very light compared to the rest of it. Because we want this to look kind of like the inside of the croissant, you know, when it's nice and flaky while baking and that part puffs up and you see the inside of it where it's a little bit whiter but still has that kind of toasty color. So making sure that that's really watered down so that you don't get a lot of color in there. And then just fill in those gaps a little bit with that color. Basically just giving it a light wash between those layers. And just make sure that it's dry as you go through all of them so that you don't blend your nice crispy edges. Try to avoid putting too much there as it'll wash out what's already dried if you overload it with water. You can always pick some up if there's a bit much. Just redefining those edges just a little bit from where we put the water over. Now taking that same brown, I'm just putting a very light wash like this to show some of those kind of toasty lines that the croissant has coming down after it's been baked. So really watered down and just doing very, very light curves. Without adding too much color to it. Just a very light wash, and you can bring some up from this side as well. Just keeping the lines very light. And I find layering washes like this over top is a really good, easy way to add dimension without really having to redo anything that you've painted, just kind of adding a little bit of detail to it. And it's pretty low risk if we keep the wash really light. So it's a nice, easy finishing touch. And there we have it. A nice, easy little watercolor croissant. Super quick and simple. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and I'll see you back again next time. Have a great day. Bye.